Look, what is your assessment of where we are? I mean, clearly Putin has wanted to up the ante straight into the new year. But at what point does this start to run out of steam? This can't continue ad infinitum.
No, I don't think it can. It can go on for somewhat longer, but both the Russians and the Ukrainians are being very, very heavily decimated, their forces. Each side has estimated to have lost something in the region of 100,000 troops, each side, killed and wounded. And I reckon on the Ukrainian side, it's probably slightly higher than Russian side. But, of course, the Ukrainians are able to continue mobilizing their forces on a routine basis, and they're able to keep fighting because of the munitions that have been supplied to them by the West. The Russians, on the other hand, have found it difficult to mobilize the forces they need. They've faced mass protests. They've faced many Russian men leaving the country to avoid being conscripted, and they're running fairly short of munitions. I'm not saying they're out of munitions or they can't keep manufacturing and pounding Ukraine, but it's both sides are being worn down, and I think what we're likely to see in the coming months is a significant offensive by the Russians if they can muster the forces to do it against the Ukrainians, and Ukraine doing their best to defend against that. It's really, in some respects, it's a matter of attrition. The Russians are trying to wear down the Ukrainians' willingness to resist by these pounding of Ukrainian cities and also killing Ukrainian soldiers in large numbers. And it's now really up to the Ukrainians to keep attacking against the Russians and killing as many Russians as they can to deplete their forces as well. So in a way, we're in a sort of attritional war that might be unlocked potentially by one side or the other, or indeed both, carrying out a major offensive in the coming months.
How much of a problem is time for Putin in all of this? It seems to be his big enemy, in the sense that the Russian people, when this all started, didn't know what was going on. It was all framed in very strange ways, and freeing the Ukrainians and what have you. Obviously, the longer this has gone on, and with more troops having to be called up and more body bags delivered home, I mean, word is certainly spreading about what is actually going on in Ukraine, even if they're not hearing it on the national media in Russia. That level of unhappiness, of anger within Russia, it is going to be the only thing, isn't it, that's got the potential to stop Putin?
Yeah, I think in many ways you're right, and it isn't just time; it's also bodies, as you say, coming home. And let's not forget that Putin is quite frightened of the impact of large-scale casualties on cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. And because of that, he's focused a huge amount, disproportionate amount, on recruiting from some of the peripheral areas like Siberia. And that itself is beginning to cause unrest. So we've seen unprecedented civil protest movements occurring in some of these peripheral areas. They're not receiving much of a voice because, of course, the media doesn't cover it very much, and Russian media is basically Putin's poodle. So, but these are problems for him, and unless he is able to produce results, I would suggest at least in the first half of 2023, then the likelihood is he could face big problems domestically. There could be a palace coup against him. That might be good news. It might be bad news if he falls as a result of unrest inside Russia, and particularly among the elites in Russia. Then he could be replaced by somebody who is more willing to be aggressive, or even more aggressive, should I say, than he is in Ukraine. Or he could be replaced by somebody who doesn't want to carry on this war. But I think the latter is probably less likely.